Hi there folks, and welcome into the Truck King YouTube channel. Hopefully by now you've seen some of our series discussing the history of the Hudson's Bay Company here in Ontario. Well, I have to tell you that none of that history would be possible without that river behind me. That is the Ottawa River, and it was truly a super highway in its day, and we want to tell the history of it. So again, we've taken these two Toyota Trailhunters and we're going to drive up and down the river, see some of the gorgeous scenery, and then tell some of its stories. So make sure you stay tuned. If you want the whole story, make sure you go back and check out videos 1 and 2 in this series. In video 1, we went to Gogama, Ontario, where an old Hudson's Bay store that's over 100 years old is still standing. And then in video 2, we went for an off-road adventure at the Voyageur multi-use trail system to really push these trucks to the limit. Now, the whole idea behind this series was getting out there and trying to tell some stories about the Hudson's Bay Company and the fur trade that maybe you weren't so familiar with. So let's continue on with that right now. So another place we ended up was Mattawa, Ontario. And Mattawa, first of all, has a great museum on the voyageurs and the fur trade. But the reason why Mattawa is so important, because that's where the Ottawa River and the Mattawa River split. So as they would come up from Montreal, that was a really crucial split in the river because it decided whether you're going north to the Arctic or west to the Great Lakes and then maybe west from there. So it was a very natural spot for a settlement and for a community to grow. There was a Hudson's Bay post in Mattawa, so you know, HBC was there as well. And we wanted to go to Mattawa, get some of that history, and it's cool standing on the banks of the river and realizing Champlain came up this river, Radisson and Groseilliers came up this river, the guys who, you know, started the HBC company, all of the voyageurs came up that river because the Ottawa River truly was the super highway of North America at that time, the St. Lawrence and then up the Ottawa. So that's why we ended up in Mattawa, and we checked out the museum, which was pretty cool, right? Pretty amazing.
Yeah, a lot of good history there. It's not just about HBC, but really just about the First Nations, Indigenous, how they were there, how they really welcomed the Europeans in the beginning anyway.
Sure.
And how that entire, you know, infrastructure came about.
Yeah, it was very interesting. And yeah, we met up with Judy at the museum and had a great conversation. So Judy, thanks so much for visiting with us today and showing us your incredible museum. You know, we're focused in on the Hudson's Bay Company and its history in Ontario. So I guess the simple question to start with is how influential was the HBC here in Mattawa?
Well, it was extremely important and became part of the community once it was amalgamated.
Mm-hmm.
It did stand alone for itself for quite a long time, but this is the historic landing of where the French came in the 1500s. They were met by our Algonquin ancestors, and they had a thriving trade community going here long before any European settlers came.
Right.
And eventually, about 200 years later,
Yeah.
HBC and the Northwest Trading Company needed to amalgamate, and they realized that they needed to do that in order for both of them to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1837, Mattawa House was established here as an HBC trading post, but the Northwest Trading Company was already here, and eventually they realized that in order for both of them to survive, they would amalgamate and become one.
Right.
As the Hudson's Bay Company.
Right.
And it was good for trade, it was good for opening up this to colonizing. It helped when the railroad was opening up, because up until then, the only means of transportation here were via these two amazing rivers.
Right.
This is the Kitchissippi, or the Ottawa River,
Uh-huh.
and this is the Mattawa River. Mattawa means meeting of the two rivers. So this was a thriving trading part of the community and how it was created.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just continued to be that because of the access of the waters.
Right.
Steamships used to come up here, and again, long before the railroad was here, steamships were coming up here.
Of course.
And so Hudson's Bay was part of that as well.
Can you speak to what the indigenous peoples taught the Europeans? Because there was a lot, right, that the Europeans took from us and took from the indigenous rather than, the other way around, just giving things to them.
Well, how to survive
Yeah.
would have been one. When you think of where most of these Europeans would have come from, they would not have experienced a winter in northern Ontario.
Sure.
As it is today.
It's getting cold today. Yeah, exactly.
So survival was the main thing. Also was means of transportation. The Algonquin, who were indigenous peoples here, we are on unceded Algonquin territory, gave the gift of the birch bark canoe to the French. When they arrived, they were in old, big, heavy wooden boats and would have had to portage with those.
Right.
When they left Montreal, when the ice went out in March, it would have been this time of year by the time they arrived here. And we're not prepared for northern Ontario winter. But it would have been much too cold to set out to go west or to go north, no matter where they were trading. And so they would have wintered here. And that's where they would have learned how to live off the land. The French were not settlers. They did live with the indigenous people. So they learned how to live off the land, how to build shelter, how to hunt, how to harvest, the berries, the fruits, the medicines. They learned medicines from the indigenous peoples.
Right.
And so there was much more going on than people think, well, they just brought a bunch of trinkets here for the indigenous peoples.
Right.
What they received back was much more valuable.
Knowledge.
It was lessons in life, lessons in knowledge, lessons of survival.
Right.
And how to continue on generations. It wasn't just a one-time shot.
Right.
They were here, they had survived for millennia, and they will continue to survive for millennia. And those were the lessons that the Europeans learned. Some of them learned it better than others.
Sure.
The French adapted very quickly, and that was their willingness to do it.
Yeah.
And then the British realized that they also had to adapt if they were going to survive.
Yeah.
And so at one point you had 3 nations living here.
Yeah.
And they all worked together to create community.
Yeah.
And that's why it has survived over all of these years.
Yeah.
We're still here.
Yeah, exactly.
And we are still at the meeting of the waters.
Yeah.
And we will continue to be here because of that. It opened up the north, it opened up the west, and they're coming in from the south and the east.
Right. Well, I got to tell you, we've enjoyed our time here. We loved the trails yesterday. We had a great time off-road, and learning the history has been incredible. So thanks so much, Judy. We appreciate it.
Come back anytime.
So that was super interesting stuff in Mattawa. And then from there, we went to Pembroke, Ontario. And honestly, the main reason is because from Mattawa to Pembroke, you're just tracking right along the Ottawa River. So we were able to, be right on the banks of the Ottawa as we went down. And the Ottawa River is a wild one because it was full of rapids. There was like 14 or more different sets of rapids at the time. So these guys paddling down with their canoes packed full of furs then had to also deal with the rapids on the Ottawa. And quite often the voyageurs, some of them would die in the rapids because canoes would overturn and they would put up crosses along the river. And at one point there was some guys writing that there was crosses sort of around every corner in the river because of the amount of people that died in those rapids. So, this is another thing. You think of, oh, it's a cute little river. No, man, that was a raging river, and it also took many lives. So that was a really an interesting part of our journey, was to track, again, with the river and try to just feel some of that history.
The thing you also see then when you get to do it today is how placid the river is, and then you realize that there are now dams along the river, and there are several power plants along the river. So again, it's just evolution. The people first come, and then they start to see how they can make a living out of the landscape. It started with furs, and today it's hydroelectricity.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And not to mention logging, right? We haven't even touched on logging, but every community we've been in, Pembroke especially, but yeah, Gogama, Mattawa, it was the fur trade first, and then it feels like the logging came in, and that was massive, and that's still going on to this day.
And then mining.
Sure, and the mining is massive.
So, and you still see lots of log trucks today, so don't worry, that's still going on.
And one of the things, doing the research, trying to read different writings from people of the time, there was lots of writings from the Jesuits who came over and were trying to, convert the indigenous to Christianity. And they would write, and then there's all kinds of writings from the voyageurs. And the one thing I connected with very deeply is all of them mention the bugs. Every single one of them talk about how miserable it is in Northern Ontario in the summertime because there's so many mosquitoes, and that's something that hasn't changed all these years later. And again, reading it, I was like, I know what you were going through. In fact, there's one guy who wrote about how on the beaches along the Ottawa River, they would try to always camp on the sandiest beach because they would bury themselves, their whole body in sand, and then sleep there, buried in the sand, just to try to escape the bugs. So again, just coming back to rugged country, not only are you dealing with sweltering heat and rocks and marsh and bog, also the mosquitoes, which, you know, none of them were used to. So it's funny to read all of those writings from the time and how they all universally mention the mosquitoes.
And then you too can experience as many mosquitoes as you like, because there is no tariff on mosquitoes. You can have as many as you want, take them wherever you want, just so you know.
Yeah, and they're still here today. Now, Dad, we've come to a really cool place here. I thought this was a neat spot to show off. This is Cotnam Island. That is the Ottawa River, and this is right near modern-day Pembroke, Ontario. And what I think is cool about this island is this was a toll island. The natives who lived in the area, the indigenous peoples, they met with the Europeans, they traded with the Europeans, but quite frankly, the Ottawa River here was just a passageway for most of the Europeans. They weren't stopping here. They were headed, you know, straight on to Mattawa and north or west from there. And the natives started to say, well, we should be charging these guys for this. If they want to use our river, they have to pay. And actually, Pierre Radisson, one of the guys who was responsible for starting the Hudson's Bay Company, he wrote that when he would come up and down the river, basically every native band along the way would expect something. And it wasn't always sort of outwardly spoken, but it was understood that if you're passing through our waters, you're going to drop us, you know, a knife, a pot, a pan, an axe. So I just think it's interesting, you know, the whole economy that grew around the fur trade.
Yeah, it was a little more complex than maybe what today we're led to believe. And these indigenous bands had their territories. And if you wanted to come through here, you had to pay. So you know what? The next time you're on the 407 and you're barking about having to pay a toll,
yeah, any toll
it
route.
started here 400 years ago.
Exactly. And what's cool too, just geographically, is this island really takes up most of the river. Now, I mean, the river's still pretty wide here, but actually this is pretty skinny compared to some spots. So they also just used the natural geography to their advantage, because right here they knew the Europeans had to come through these channels, so it was easy to stop them along the way.
Yeah, it's just kind of cool to be here and realize what was happening here so many hundreds of years ago.
Yeah. And I think this is a natural lead in to the fact that we visited the Canadian Canoe Museum in Peterborough, Ontario, because the canoe was the, you know, main mode of transport for these fur traders and all of these voyageurs. The canoe essentially founded modern day Canada as we know it. Without it, there is no Canada, there is no fur trade. So why don't we go learn some more about some canoes?
Let's go see them.
So Peter, thanks so much for visiting with us today and showing off your incredible museum. It's almost too obvious of a question, but you just have to start at the beginning, which is how influential was the canoe in the fur trade? You know, how important was it?
Well, there probably wouldn't be a fur trade without the canoe. Otherwise, it would be a very slow overland affair.
Right.
But because Canada is so full of interconnected waterways, for thousands of years, people have been traveling them by canoe, trading in between communities. So when the fur trade comes into existence, in full effect, I should say, in the 18th century, those Europeans are stamping their own trade routes on top of indigenous trade routes, using the canoe as a means to get from A to B, and really from coast to coast to coast eventually. I've got a couple pieces here to talk about the birch bark canoe that would have been, thank you, adapted into the birch bark canoes of the 26, 36 foot of the fur trade.
Yeah.
Essentially, the whole boat is all organic material, and it's all under tension. The end result is a workhorse vehicle, a vehicle designed to do work, designed to take a beating, designed to go over rapids and carry heavy loads.
Right.
So with all that in mind, it's amazing to think about that they're not made of plastic, they're not made of carbon fiber, Kevlar, whatever. The same simple materials that birch bark canoes have been made with for thousands of years. So you start with birch, obviously that is the hull. The interior are typically softwood, typically cedar. It's really malleable. So we've got two types of wood so far. We've got birch bark on the outside, we've got cedar on the inside. We're gonna add another type of wood. We're gonna add spruce root. So this is, again, much like the birch, the cedar, the spruce root is harvested, boiled, split down the center, and this becomes the lashing to hold the tension of birch shape and the ribs together. And so here's your tree number 3.
Can I feel that one?
That's dried right now.
Yeah.
To use any of these materials, you'd be steaming or using boiling water to pour that on so that the wood becomes malleable, so that the root becomes malleable and the bark becomes malleable once you've added heat to it.
And then as it dries, it kind of hardens as well, then a little bit.
Hardens in, and so now it's really important that once it hardens into the shape or dries into the shape that you've got, then you keep it under tension. So super important to be able to hold that boat together, really. And then the last thing that you would need is pitch pine, so a combination of spruce gum, the really sticky bits, if you break off the branch of a tree, that's spruce gum, plus bear grease, which is a reduction of bear fat.
Bear fat.
Yeah, so mixing that up gives the birch bark canoe its distinct black lines, waterproofing the different cuts of the bark or waterproofing two bark cuts together.
Cool. And it's funny, I mean, on our adventure, we actually had a flat tire. We bring all the stuff along to fix, our flat tire along the way. I take it these guys were also bringing a lot of extra materials with them to fix their canoe along the way too.
Absolutely.
Right?
So the birch bark canoe is infinitely repairable if you take good care of it or know what you're doing. So voyageurs would be bringing rolls of birch bark along with them. Once pitch dries, it becomes very hard. And so you might be bringing a pot of that along to help seal. You might have a roll, a spool of dried root like yourself, like what you're holding there. But yeah, so if you have the misfortune of hitting a rock, you might be able to, you would be able to spend your night repairing the canoe and be ready for the next day. Time is money and space is money if you're thinking about the voyageur canoe and the fur trade as an industry, of course, which it was. Companies looking to make money, you want to pack efficiently. So instead of beaver pelts scattered all about, you pack them into bales, about 90 pounds a bale.
Right.
And so you'd be asked to carry one of those over the portage.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Here, I'll help you out because it's 90 pounds here.
Like so?
Just like that. Yeah, you're gonna utilize.
Wow, and then I'm sure you're still carrying a bunch of stuff in your hands too, right?
And you might be using your hands to balance that out and probably trying to tip yourself forward.
Right,
and
yeah,
keeping your
naturally,
spine
right?
As straight as possible.
And then hiking over some of the most rugged bush imaginable.
Yeah, and then this one here is loaded up to the weight of a pack. If you want to try that.
Oh my gosh, yeah, which is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous that they're hauling those with them. So I think finally, I mean, I could ask you questions all day, but finally, just tell us about the museum and why people should come here, today and visit your beautiful museum here.
Yeah, we're the Canadian Canoe Museum. We're located in Peterborough, Ontario. We hold the world's largest collection of paddled watercraft. Cool. Those watercraft being all over the world. Roughly 600, over 600 in our collection. About 120 on display right now, and more in our collection hall.
Yeah, and the collection hall is unbelievable to see it through that glass and just rows and rows of wild-looking boats.
Yeah, so what our museum endeavors is to tell the story of humans and cultures all over the world, answering the question, how do I get across this body of water?
Right.
How are all these canoes being made based on the different geographic regions that they come from, and then why are they being made? Are they birch bark canoes for the fur trade, or are they carbon fibers to win an Olympic gold medal? So all of those are valid forms of paddling, and so we like to follow the stories where they come from.
Yeah, awesome. Peter, thanks so much for visiting us, man.
Thanks.
It's been amazing. Our visit to the Canadian Canoe Museum was very insightful, and just in case you haven't noticed, they have an incredible map on the floor there, and we've used it in many shots here in this series, but it gives you a real immense appreciation for just how interconnected this part of Canada is, thanks to its lakes and rivers. So that was the last stop on our tour, and as we began the trek home, we couldn't help but reflect on how these trucks had worked for us, some of the good things and some of the bad. Now there is one Achilles heel, I'll call it, when it comes to the sort of overall adventurousness of these vehicles, and that is the range. When the new Tacoma and the new 4Runner came out, the fuel tanks got smaller, and I remember asking the question at the time, hey, why'd the fuel tank get smaller? And I was told the fuel economy is so much better that you won't even notice. Well, unfortunately, it's noticeable. When I filled up this Tacoma, I was seeing 430-ish kilometers of overall range. And it's just not great. And you know what, that day to day, you might not notice it a lot if you're just taking a thing to work Monday to Friday, but on a trip like this, on an adventure, you notice. And suddenly it becomes, are we stopping for gas? Yes, you stop for gas every chance you get, basically, because yeah, you're just not gonna make it from town to town. So that is one slightly frustrating thing with these trucks.
Yeah, that's not something you've had to think about for a while. It made me laugh because we always do that when driving electric vehicles.
Right.
Where's the next charging station? But in this case, when you're in Northern Ontario, you truly say, well, where's the next gas station?
Right.
And you don't drive by it.
Right. And that's it. We didn't have to carry fuel or anything like that, but still, you're just spending that much more time stopping at the station.
Yeah, no, well, it's just one of those things, right?
And then talking about overall fuel economy, we did track with the trailer and without. With the trailer on this Tacoma, we were just over 19 liters per 100 kilometers, which is, I think, is basically what I expected. It's not a terrible number when you consider that not only is the trailer kind of heavy, it's sitting up tall, so that's a big wind drag back there.
Yeah, so just to remind you, give or take 4,000 pounds is what we're dragging.
Right.
And as Steve said, this is a deck over trailer, so the unit's sitting up high. It's going to be acting like a great big sail.
Yeah, 100%. And let me throw in a thank you here to Motion Trailer Rentals in Alliston, Ontario, for hooking us up with the trailer you've seen in this entire series. And then unloaded, you can almost cut it in half. We've been seeing basically 11 liters per 100, 10-ish liters per 100 when these things have been running empty. And those are not crazy speeds, but I'll also say that that's been in a lot of hill country. We're constantly up and down, up and down, up and down. So that might be a slightly worse number than you might get on a nice flat highway. But yeah, I think around 10 or 11 is what you can expect empty, which is okay.
Yeah, and so we suspect that some of that extra space got used up because of the batteries.
Right.
There's only so many places you can stick a battery, and yeah, I think the fuel tank missed out on some space.
Yep, and I know I'm not the only one who's complained about this. It's out there amongst the owners, so this is wait and see, because we know with the Tundra, Toyota did hear the complaints, and they did come along and say, okay, we'll give you a big fuel tank. So now we got to wait and see if they do that with these vehicles as well.
They're just going to have to reconfigure.
Right. With that, folks, we come to the end of this video and the end of our series, Trail Hunting Tales of the Hudson's Bay Company. And 2025 truly marks the end of an era as the HBC is now out of business. As for the Trailhunter models from Toyota, well, I learned a lot about them on this trip. No, they're not perfect. The fuel range should be much better, and they are pretty expensive. But honestly, what used to only be achievable through the aftermarket now comes straight from the dealership floor, and that's what the Trailhunters are all about. They are definitely some of the best purpose-built Overlanders you are going to find. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the series. Now please, drop in the comments, let us know exactly what you think. We love doing these series where we tie in trucks to some local history and some geography. So yeah, we want to do more of it. Please drop us your ideas down there. Let us know what you think. And then as always, hit like, hit subscribe, hit join to become a member. Come right back here to Truck King and see what we're testing next. See ya.
See ya.